The phone rang at 12:40 in the morning. At first, I almost let it ring. I'd fallen asleep in my recliner with the TV still muttering in the background, and at 68, getting yanked awake that suddenly feels like your heart forgot the rules for a second. Then I saw my granddaughter's name. She never called that late. I answered. And before I could say hello, I heard traffic. And breathing. Fast, shaky breathing, like she was trying not to cry loud enough for somebody nearby to hear her. Then she whispered, "Grandpa, don't tell Mom I called you." That was the moment I knew something was wrong, not teenage wrong, not we had an argument. Wrong. Fear. Real fear. I sat up straight in the chair and lowered the television volume all the way down. "Where are you?" "At the food barn on Maple." "At midnight?" "What happened?" There was a pause long enough for me to hear cars passing behind her. Then she said quietly,
"Eric locked my bank card because I bought chicken strips during my break. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at my reflection in the dark window beside the recliner. I looked tired."
Older than I remembered looking the night before. "Stay where you are," I told her. "I'm coming. Let me take you back to how it all started. My name's Walter Briggs. Retired union electrician. Widower for 3 years. My daughter Denise used to joke that I could fix anything with duct tape, electrical tape, and bad language, back before life wore her down. Her first marriage was a disaster. Her ex-husband drank half his paycheck and disappeared completely once child support became real. For years, my daughter worked herself into the ground trying to keep things together. Double shifts, late bills, stress headaches. My granddaughter growing up faster than she should have because there wasn't much choice. Then Eric came along. Pressed shirts, firm handshakes, talked about investments and responsibility all the time. He sounded like stability. And after the years my daughter had lived through, stability probably felt like safety. At first I tried hard to like him. Truth is, when you get older, you stop caring about charm. You start caring about reliability, bills getting paid, doors staying open, heat staying on in the winter. Eric understood that, but little things about him started bothering me. At dinners, he answered questions meant for my daughter. If I asked how work was going, he answered. If I asked my granddaughter about school, he answered faster than she could. "She's learning." Accountability, he'd say. Always that. Word accountability. The man talked like a motivational podcast, and my granddaughter started changing. Not loud changes. Quiet. Once she stopped interrupting conversations, stopped laughing halfway through stories, like she used to, started watching people's faces before speaking. Careful quiet, that's the only way I know how to describe it. I noticed it, clearly during my daughter's birthday dinner. My granddaughter had just gotten her first part-time job at the grocery store. She came over still wearing her green apron because she'd gotten off late. While my daughter was cutting cake, I slipped my granddaughter $50. "For school supplies," I said. She smiled automatically. Then Eric leaned back in his chair and said, "You planning to report that income?" Everybody gave those awkward little family laughs people do when something sounds like a joke but doesn't feel like one. My granddaughter didn't laugh. She lowered her eyes immediately. Later that night, I walked into the kitchen for more coffee and saw something that stuck with me. Eric's wallet was sitting on the counter beside his keys, and my granddaughter quietly slid the $50 bill inside it. Not handed it to him, slid it in carefully, almost like she hoped nobody would notice, but my daughter noticed. I know she did. She looked at it for half a second, then turned away and started wrapping leftovers. That bothered me more than the money. I drove home with that uneasy feeling sitting in my chest. The kind where your instincts keep trying to tell you something, while your brain keeps making excuses for it. Over the next few months, more things started piling up. My granddaughter quit school band even though she loved it. Same. Pair of worn sneakers every week. Stopped answering my texts the way she used to, and every conversation about money somehow became another lesson from Eric. She needs discipline. She needs structure. She needs to understand adulthood. After a while, my daughter started repeating his exact phrases. And there. Afternoon, I stopped by their house unannounced with tomatoes from my garden. Granddaughter was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. She asked my daughter if she could buy shampoo after work. Just shampoo. Nothing fancy. My daughter opened her mouth to answer, then looked at Eric first. That hit me harder than it should have. A grown woman checking another person's reaction before answering her own child. Eric didn't even look up from his laptop. Didn't you buy some 2 weeks ago? My granddaughter immediately started apologizing. I was just asking. You go through products too fast, he said calmly. She nodded like she'd done something wrong. I remember standing there holding those tomatoes thinking, what kind of house makes a 17-year-old feel guilty for needing shampoo? But I stayed quiet. That part's on me. People think betrayal always arrives screaming. Sometimes it shows up politely. Sometimes it looks like decent people convincing themselves not to interfere. Then came the phone call. I found my granddaughter sitting on the curb outside the grocery store, with her knees pulled against her chest. Her work apron was still on. She looked exhausted and away sleep. Doesn't fix. I handed her my jacket and asked, what happened? She kept looking over her shoulder before answering. Eric gets alerts every time I use my card. For your bank account? She nodded. He said I wasted money. You bought food. He packed food at home already. I frowned. So, she swallowed hard before saying it. He says if I waste money, I owe the household back. I stared at her. What does that mean? He takes it from my paycheck. How much? Most of it. I honestly thought I misunderstood. You mean rent? He says living there costs money. And your mother's okay with this? She looked down at the parking lot pavement. That silence answered me. I drove her home around 1:30. Eric was standing in the driveway waiting, hands in his pockets. Calm expression. Sometimes calm people scare you more than angry ones. There she is, he said lightly. Our runaway employee. The second he spoke, my granddaughter seemed to shrink beside me. That's the only way I can explain it, like her body got smaller near him. She called because her card stopped working. I said. Eric smiled. Consequences are part of learning. She bought food. She bought unnecessary food. We prepare meals at home. Everything was we. Like control sounded kinder if you said it as teamwork. My daughter came outside wearing a robe. Tired face. Nervous smile. Dad, it's okay. We're handling it. Handling it. I looked at my granddaughter standing silently while two adults discussed her like she was a budget problem. That was the night I stopped sleeping properly. After that, I started paying attention for real. And once you notice control, you start seeing it everywhere. My granddaughter asking permission before speaking. Eric checking her phone during dinner. My daughter repeating his opinions word for word. Then one Friday afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store with coffee for my granddaughter during her shift. That's when everything changed for me. I heard Eric before I saw him. You think I'm stupid? The front registers had gone completely quiet. Granddaughter stood near customer service, frozen in place while Eric waved a paycheck stub in his hand. You added extra hours. I didn't, she whispered. Then explain this amount. Customers stared and pretended not to stare at the same time. A teenage cashier looked terrified. And there stood my granddaughter apologizing to a grown man for earning money at her own job. Then Eric held his hand out. Tips? She reached into her apron pocket and handed him folded cash right there in front of everybody. Felt something inside me go cold. Not anger exactly. Clarity. For a second, I almost walked over there. Almost. But I spent 40 years working around live electricity. You learn eventually that reacting emotionally at the wrong moment only makes damage worse. So I stayed quiet and I watched. That night I called my daughter. You know he's humiliating her in public? He's trying to teach responsibility. She's afraid of him. No, she's not. You sure about that? Long silence. Then my daughter sighed and said, You don't understand how hard it is to keep a household together. That sentence sat heavy in my chest because she didn't deny it. Didn't say he was wrong. Didn't say she'd fix it. Just that keeping the household together mattered more. That's when I realized this wasn't ignorance anymore. It was surrender. A week later, my granddaughter's school counselor called me because I was listed as emergency contact. Her voice sounded careful. Mr. Briggs, has there been financial stress at home? I asked why. Another pause. Then she said my granddaughter had borrowed lunch money from teachers several times over the past few months. I sat in my truck outside a hardware store after that call and just stared through the windshield. My granddaughter worked 5 days a week, and she still couldn't afford lunch. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. I started digging quietly. One afternoon, while Eric thought she was working late, I helped my granddaughter pull up her banking records. What we found made me sick. A joint account connected to her checks, Eric's name attached, automatic transfers, cash withdrawals, fees, almost nothing left after every deposit hit. And the whole time we looked through it, my granddaughter kept apologizing. I should have noticed sooner. I know it sounds stupid. I probably handled it wrong. That part hurt worse than the money. People who live under control long enough start blaming themselves for being controlled. Then came the moment that changed the entire story for me. We were sitting at my kitchen table while rain hit the windows, coffee between us getting cold. And I finally asked the question I'd been avoiding. When did your mother know? My granddaughter stared at the table for a long time. Then she said quietly, Mom saw him take my debit card the first time. I felt my chest tighten. She told me not to fight about it. That sentence changed every memory I had, every nervous dinner, every forced laugh, every time my daughter changed the subject. She knew. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the full shape of it. But enough. Enough to stop it, and she stayed quiet. My granddaughter started crying after that. Not dramatic crying, just exhausted crying. The kind where somebody's been holding everything in too long. I stopped asking for help, she said. It always made things worse. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine, and right there, I made a decision. No more family diplomacy. No more waiting for people to suddenly do the right thing. From that moment on, this became evidence. I collected everything: bank transfers, screenshots, statements from the school counselor, records of missing deposits. A bank employee quietly explained procedures Eric should never have been allowed to bypass. I helped my granddaughter open protected accounts under new banking supervision. And through all of it, I stayed calm. That drove Eric crazy. Men like him survive by making everybody else emotional. Makes them look reasonable by comparison. I never gave him that. When the fraud complaint process officially started, Eric called me screaming one night. Said I was destroying the family. I remember standing in my garage listening to him yell through the speakerphone while I tightened a clamp on my workbench. Then I said, "You took money from a child." Silence. Then he started talking about discipline again. That word, like repeating it enough, could turn fear into parenting. The mediation meeting happened 3 months later. Small conference room downtown, investigators, lawyers. My daughter sitting pale beside Eric and me. Eric walked in, confident. Still thought he could explain everything away. Then I slid the folder across the table. Every paycheck, every transfer, every withdrawal, chronological, organized, highlighted. The investigator flipped page after page while Eric slowly stopped talking. Then came the security footage from the grocery store parking lot. No sound. Didn't need any. Just him cornering my granddaughter beside her car while she handed over cash with shaking hands. Halfway through the video, my daughter covered her mouth and started crying. Eric finally snapped and said, "I was teaching accountability," and for the first time in months I interrupted him. Quietly. "No," I said. "Discipline helps a kid grow up. What you did was teach her to be afraid every time she spent $5. Nobody said a word after that, because everybody in that room knew it was true. Eric lost access to the household finances first. Then my daughter found debts he'd hidden under her name. Then his employer got pulled into the investigation. Funny thing about accountants, companies get nervous when fraud starts following somebody around. He lost his job 2 weeks later. My granddaughter moved in with me during the proceedings. The first month was hard to watch. She apologized constantly. For eating snacks, for taking long showers, for using too much laundry detergent. One night she asked if she should start paying me back for groceries. That almost broke me. I looked at her and said, "Kiddo, Food isn't something you earn from me. She started crying harder at that than she did during the investigation. My daughter started therapy eventually. Took longer than it should have, but she got there. The hardest conversation we ever had happened on my back porch one evening. She admitted she stayed quiet because she was terrified of being poor again. I thought stability mattered more, she said. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. If somebody has to live scared for your home to feel stable, then it isn't stable. She cried after that. Real crying, not defensive crying, the kind that comes when excuses finally run out. It's been almost a year now. Last Friday, I sat in a high school auditorium watching my granddaughter perform with the school band again. Kids missed notes, trumpets cracked, drums too loud. Best music I'd heard in years. My granddaughter looked different under those lights. Not perfect, not healed completely, but safe. After the concert, her friends dragged her to a diner nearby. I watched her stand at the counter and pay for her own food with her debit card. No permission, no apology. No nervous glance over her shoulder first. Just a teenage girl buying fries and laughing too loud with her friends. My daughter stood beside me watching it too. Quieter these days. Trying carefully. That matters. I kept my hands in my coat pockets and said, "Funny thing about control, people using it always call it responsibility." My daughter nodded slowly without looking away from her child, and standing there, I realized something. Families usually don't fall apart from one big moment. They fall apart one ignored silence at a time, one excuse at a time. One person deciding keeping the peace matters more than protecting somebody vulnerable. And sometimes the only way to put a family back together is finally refusing to stay quiet anymore.